I can compare fractions that are 1-unit fractions from one whole. In today's lesson, you will learn a fourth strategy from the Comparing Fractions Toolkit. This is a strategy to try when both of the fractions you are comparing are greater than 1/2 and also seem to be pretty close to one whole. It's called comparing fractions that are 1-unit fraction from one whole. So let's take a look at these two fractions, 7/8 and 5/6. Let's see what it looks like using our fraction strips. Okay, so which fraction is greater? Well, you can clearly see that 7/8 is greater than 5/6. And which fraction is less? Well, 5/6 would be less than 7/8. So let's read this together. 7/8 is greater than 5/6. We can see with the fraction pieces that 7/8 is longer than the 5/6. So that tells us that 7/8 is greater than 5/6. But let's suppose that we didn't have our fraction pieces. How would we be able to tell that 7/8 is indeed greater than 5/6? Well, let's think about it. Think about how many eighths equals one whole. Well, it would be 8, right? That's why the denominator is 8. That tells us how many equal pieces a whole is broken up into. Now, let's think. How many sixths equals one whole? Well, again, the denominator tells us. So that would be 6. So in order to make one whole with the denominator being 8, we would have to have 8 pieces of the 8. Same thing with the 6. We would need 6/6 to make that one whole. Now, let's figure out how much more is needed to add on to each of the fractions to equal one whole. So use your fraction pieces to figure out the missing pieces that would make the fraction trains for 1/8 and 1/6 as long as the whole blue strip. So pause this video until you're ready. Okay, so what did you figure out? Well, let's see. How many more 1/8 pieces will we need in order to make the 1/8 as long as the whole blue strip? Well, you would really only need one more 1/8 piece. So we would have 7/8 plus 1/8, and that's going to give us 1, or as you know, 1 is equal to 1/8. How about the 6? How many 6 pieces, 1/6 pieces, do you need in order to make this 6 train as long as the whole that we have here? Well, also, we would only need 1/6 piece. So we could say that 5/6 plus another 1/6 piece gives us one whole, or is equal to one whole, or 6/6. And now that we figured that out, now we can use the compare unit fraction strategy, because now we have a fraction here where they both have the numerator as 1. So now we're looking at 1/8 and 1/6. Now, I know that 1/8 is less than 1/6. Explain how I know that. Turn and talk to your partner. Well, we know that because we use the strategy of comparing unit fractions, right? If we were to cut a whole into 8 pieces, those pieces would be smaller than if we would just cut it into only 6 pieces. Now, think about it. 1/8, again, is less than 1/6. So 7/8 is closer to 1 whole. And since 7/8 is closer to 1 whole than 5/6 is, 7/8 has to be greater. Here are 2 more fractions to compare. First, you'll use your fraction pieces to figure out which is greater and which is less. Then we'll try this new strategy again. So here we have 2/3 and 3/4. Go ahead and place your fraction strips so that you can compare the fractions. Okay, so this is what you should have. So which fraction is greater? Well, you can clearly see that 3/4 is greater than the 2/3. So let's read this together. 2/3 is less than 3/4. So we can see with the fraction pieces that the 2/3 train is shorter than the 3/4 train. So obviously 2/3 is less than 3/4. But if we didn't have our fraction pieces, we could use a new strategy. So how many thirds equals 1 whole? Well, that would be 3, right? So 1 equals 3/3. Again, we know that because that's why the denominator is 3. That means that the whole is cut into 3 equal parts. And how many fourths equals 1 whole? Well, that's the same concept, right? 1 equals 4/4. Now, figure out how much more is needed to add on to each fraction to equal 1 whole. Pause this video and turn and talk to your partner. So, the missing piece for the 1/3 train is only another 1/3. So we can say 2/3 plus another 1/3 is equal to 1 whole or 3/3. And the missing piece for the 1/4 train to make 1 whole is also just 1/4. And likewise, we can say 3/4 plus 1/4 is equal to 1 or 4/4. So now we can go ahead and compare the unit fractions. So 2/3 is only 1/3 away from making a whole, and 3/4 is only 1/4 away from making a whole. So we know that 1/4 is less than 1/3. So explain to your partner how we know that 1/4 is less than 1/3. Pause this video until you're ready. Well, we know that 1/4 is less than 1/3 because we can use the strategy of comparing unit fractions. A whole cut into 4 pieces is going to be smaller pieces than a whole that's cut into third pieces. Therefore, 1/4 is less than 1/3. So now, explain how we know that 3/4 has to be closer to 1 whole. Turn and talk to your partner and pause this video until you're ready. Well, 1/4 is less than 1/3. So 3/4 is closer to 1 whole. Now turn and talk to your partner and explain why 3/4 has to be greater than 2/3. Pause this video until you're ready. So 3/4 has to be greater than 2/3 because 1/4 is a smaller piece taken from the whole, leaving more of the whole remaining. So now let's add on to our comparing fractions strategy chart. Strategy 4. Compare fractions 1 unit fraction from 1 whole. In this lesson, you learn how to compare fractions that are 1 unit fraction from 1 whole.